machine learning. Today we will look at combining different models, and that will help us increase the accuracy than what we can get with a single model. That is the primary objective, and it also gives us better robustness to certain types of errors and gives us better generalization. So let's look at how we can combine different models. So the objectives will be, we'll look at the advantages of combining different models. We will also look at different ways of combining models, and within the combination of models there are two specific algorithms that we will talk about. One is the decision tree learning and the other is adaptive boosting or AdaBoost. So the questions for today's lecture are, why should we combine models? So one of the reasons is that there are multiple models available and none of them are perfect, or none of them may have very high accuracy. So sometimes when we combine them we get better accuracy. Then you can have models that cater to different subsets of the features on which you are trying to fit the model, or different parts of the feature space. So they may have some complementary properties that may help them compensate for the errors of the other models. Now, once we start combining models, there are different issues that come to mind. How many classifiers or models should we have? What kind of model should we have, and what kind of features should be used for each classifier or model? And how do we combine different classifiers? So here I'm just using classifier as an example, but we will also see that the same kind of model combination can also be done for regression. So there are different stories of success of combining models. If you look at any online competition such as the $1 million prize by Netflix to make a movie recommendation engine, or several of the competitions on Kaggle or different ML online workshops and conferences, most of the top entries are usually ensemble or combination of multiple models. So this is a trick that you should have up your sleeve to be able to get higher accuracies, better generalization, etc. So you can also see in many leaderboards for famous competitions, machine learning competitions, that the top few models are usually combination of models. So here, for example, the number 2 model itself, the entry itself, they name their entry as the ensemble. Ensemble is a specific combination of different models. So why do these ensembles work? So ensemble in a nutshell is basically averaging multiple models, and what happens is that many times different models can only look at some parts of the big elephant. So one model thinks that the distribution of the data is like the trunk of the elephant, another model thinks that it is like the leg of the elephant, another thing is like the tail of the elephant, and so forth. But when you combine all their knowledge together, the whole picture of the elephant, or the entire distribution of the data, it emerges with their combined wisdom. So these are like different blind men who are touching different parts of the elephant and thinking what the elephant is like. So let's take a more concrete example. So let's say we have two-dimensional variables, right? So let me bring my pen up. So let's say we have two variables, x1 and x2, and let's say we have two different models. Okay, we have the data distribution is such that it is a multimodal Gaussian. So there is one that is sitting here, another that is sitting here, and then somewhere these contours merge, right? So it's possible that what we do is we take one model and we have that one model, basically, let me change the color, maybe that will be better. So let's say we have two different Gaussians and the other one is somewhere sitting somewhere else, right? So here what we mean by this is that this could be just distribution of one class, not two different classes. And then let's say your other class actually has a distribution somewhere else. So your other class is also multimodal. Okay, and we want to find a combined decision boundary between the two classes. So here it's possible that just modeling one of the modes of the conditional class distribution is not enough. We want to be able to model the multiple modes. We want to be able to model this mode as well as this mode for class 1, and then this mode and this mode for class 2. So in this case, if we have two different models and we take the average decision of the two different models, that might turn out to be better. Another example could be that we look at two different dimensions. Even if we have a unimodal distribution and we examine only the feature x1 or only the feature x2, then with respect to feature x1, we may just be modeling something like a Gaussian tunnel, which does not vary in one direction, and then we may be modeling another Gaussian tunnel for x2, which may not be varying in this direction. So combining these two, by taking a product of these two, for example, we may be able to approximate the two-dimensional Gaussians. So these are different ways to think about how models get combined and they give you better results. Okay. So before we delve further into how to combine these models and some sort of proofs and simplified conditions of that these combinations work, let's first talk about the richness of models. So some models are more rich than others. What I mean by richness is that they can model a wider class of functions by varying the parameters, and some models are simpler. So to give you an example, we can compare decision thresholds with linear classifiers, and obviously linear classifiers are richer than just decision thresholds. We will come to that in a bit, but think about it this way, that if you take the entire space of functions, so let's say we are looking at a space of functions. Okay, so within this space of functions, right, the set of functions that can be modeled by one type of a model, okay, will form a set. Okay, so this is called the set of hypothesis. This is the hypothesis class. What's a hypothesis? The hypothesis is that the function that I have learned is actually what is modeling the data, either the classification or the regression of the data. Okay, or it could be just density modeling. But the set of function or the function that I have chosen is good for modeling the data. So that is my hypothesis, and that hypothesis is not completely true or completely false, because it's not completely false because it comes close to the data, and it is not completely true because it does not exactly model the data. We could overfit and exactly model the data, but then it may not fit on the validation data. So be that as it may, the point is that if we look at all the set of functions that can be modeled by one type of a model, where the only thing that we may vary is the parameters of the model. So let's say we call it h of theta x. Okay, so if we can only change theta, right, for different theta we will get different functions, and that entire functions in the space of all functions is this set. All right, it's possible that if we have a richer set of functions, that set may be a larger set, that may be a superset of the given set. So let's say we have g phi of theta, g phi of x, and g phi of x is bigger, and h theta of x is a subset of g phi of x. Okay, so that's possible. So for example, this could be, for example, linear, and this could be polynomial. So polynomial is a superset of linear. Okay, and it's also possible that we have an entirely different set of hypotheses which may or may not overlap with these classes. Okay, so it's possible that we have something like this, okay, which is another different type of function, g h, let's say f psi of x, and that could be a completely different set of functions. So some of the functions may overlap, that can be modeled by both classes. So this is how we would like to think about hypothesis class. So when you have a classifier, if you have a linear classifier, it's one hypothesis class. If you have a neural network with 5 hidden units, then it's a different set of hypothesis classes. Okay, if you have a decision threshold in any of the variables, then it's a different set of hypothesis classes. within the class, the hypothesis can shift by varying the parameters. So now let's look at the hypothesis class of a threshold. So if you have a single variable, right? So this is your single variable x1. Your decision threshold can be anywhere. It can be here, it can be here, it can be here, it can be here, anywhere, right? And it can be such that at that threshold, negative is on the left side and positive is on the right side, or it can be such that negative is on the other side and positive is on one side. Okay. So if we have a classifier that basically says, okay, ax plus b greater than 0, right, or something along those lines, right, then that particular classifier where a can be plus 1 or minus 1, we can fix it. That particular classifier is a decision threshold classifier for a single variable. Okay. Now let's say if we have multiple variables, right? So let's say we have two variables, x1 and x2, but we are allowed to choose threshold for only one of the two decisions. Okay. For one of the two variables, so we can either we can have x1 greater than theta 1, or we can have x2 greater than theta 2. We can also have x1 less than theta 1, and we can have x2 less than theta 2. So these are the type of functions we can have. So the hypothesis class would be any axis aligned boundary, right? So it will be either parallel to x1 axis, or it will be parallel to the x2 axis, and depending on which one we select, one side will be positive, the other side will be negative. We will not have a slanting line. Okay, for a threshold class, we will not have slanting lines. On the other hand, if we look at linear classifiers, right, so here we have W transpose X plus B, okay, whether that is greater than 0 or not, that is your hypothesis class, and that defines your class 1 or class 2. Okay, and let's say now we have x1 and x2. So here your hypothesis classes are going to be any line including axis aligned lines, okay, where one of the W1 or W2 is 0. That is also possible, but it can also have slanting lines, and then either upper side of the line is positive, or the lower side is positive, or the left side is positive, or right side is positive. All those possibilities are there depending on W and their signs, and B, which shift the line, right? So here what we can see is that if you look at decision thresholds, that's one hypothesis class, and a bigger hypothesis class, that's a superset of this class, is linear classifiers. Okay. So the thing to note here is that linear classifier is richer. It can model a larger variety of functions than thresholds, and it also subsumes the thresholds. Okay, it's a superset of these thresholds. So what is the advantage? Advantage is clear that we can model more complex functions. We can have lower training error. So whenever you have a richer class of hypothesis, it's in general going to have lower training error. Okay. But the question is, does it also have lower testing error or validation error? That we don't know. Sometimes we're giving too much freedom to the model, to the regressor or the classifier. We may get lower training error but poor generalization, which is poor validation error. We'll get high validation error. Okay, so having a richer hypothesis class is not always good, but we should be aware that sometimes we need richer hypothesis classes, sometimes we need to restrict the hypothesis classes depending on how we are doing on the validation data. So how we are doing on the generalization as well. So restricting the classifier is regularization. It could be regularization by design. We purposefully choose a classifier that is not rich enough, not too rich, let me put it that way. Or it could be because of we add some sort of a weight penalty and so forth. So there are different ways of restricting the classifier, restricting the hypothesis class. So now also let's look at linear classifiers. So this is, let's say, linear. Now on top of that we add not just this function, not just the error square, let's say, not just the loss, okay, but we also add lambda by 2 times mod of w square. So let's say we also do L2 regularization on that. So depending on lambda, so if I tighten the lambda to infinity, positive infinity, I will get w equal to 0. So that's one type of a classifier or a regressor. So that is going to be a point where all the w's are 0, or perhaps not a point, maybe a small set, because b can move. B is usually not part of the regularization. So by regularizing, I am actually creating a nested set of hypothesis classes where when I increase lambda, I go towards smaller and smaller sets. Okay, increasing lambda, increasing regularization reduces the hypothesis class. Okay. So we make the hypothesis class smaller and smaller. So that's another way of looking at hypothesis classes. So why this is important, we will see. We have till now seen how to restrict the hypothesis classes. By combining classifiers, what I will show is that you can actually expand the hypothesis class. So we already talked about nested hypothesis classes of single and multiple variables. So here, let me quickly recap. So if we can only have decision thresholds on a single variable, right, x1 or x2, then I can have only this kind of a class, right? So I can only have either this kind of a class, or I can have, let's say, this kind of a class, right? So if I'm allowed to have a decision threshold on only x1 or x2, but if I'm allowed to have decision thresholds on multiple of them, so for example, if I have x1 and x2 or something along those lines, then I can have hypothesis classes that look like this also. I can use, if I use and or something along those lines, if I have or, then I can have hypothesis classes like this also. So there are different ways of expanding the hypothesis class. Sometimes you increase the number of variables that are allowed, sometimes you combine multiple classifiers, and so forth. Okay. So now let's look at neural networks. Neural networks form a nested hypothesis classes when we change the number of hidden neurons. So let's say if you have x1 and x2 as two inputs, and then I have a 3 hidden neurons, okay, and then they combine to give me a classification. I'm just using classification as an illustrative example, but it is also applicable to validation. Compare this to if I have only 2 hidden neurons. Okay. So the hypothesis class of 3 is a superset of hypothesis class of 2 hidden neurons. And why is that? Because I can always turn the weights coming in and out of one neuron on the neural network on the left hand side to be 0, and because of that I can actually simulate a 2 hidden neuron neural network. And if we try to look at it in x1 x2 space, right, so a 3 hidden neuron basically or approximately is a combination of 3 lines, and then you can color these lines black. You can color these half spaces that you have. Now you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7 half spaces, or 7 spaces that in general that we will have because of these 3 lines. You can color them any which way using the weights of the final layer, and and the weights of the initial length. So based on that, you can get different kinds of hypotheses. Whereas when you have only two neurons, your hypothesis space would be the set of functions that can be formed using two hyperplanes. Okay, so one like this, another like this, something like that. And obviously the one with three hidden neurons is going to be a superset of the hypothesis space compared to the one that has only two neurons.